This is the 21.5 Show.
You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Whether you're a professional pilot or want to be one, you're in the right place.
Let's get started.
Join professional aviators Dylan and Max as they talk their experience in the airlines, business aviation, and more.
Life is good.
Industry experts, unique stories, and plenty of fun. This is the 21.5 Show.
Here we go.
Are you ready, Max? Are you ready for another episode? For number 99. Are you ready?
99.
Here we go.
99 problems, and this podcast is one. Let me tell you.
Definitely is one today. That's right. Welcome, fellow pilots, aviators from across the globe. It is Dylan and Max in the 21.5 Show. It's a show for professional pilots by professional pilots, and we are excited to bring you another episode full of flight advice, mail, exciting announcements, and I wanted to kick things off, Max, with this. I want you to hear what my house has sounded like all week.
Oh, I know what that is. No, it's not the furlough flute.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the record pilot hiring recorder solo.
That's right.
That's what we're going to continue to play as long as we are hiring pilots, and record numbers is going to be Dylan's son, my nephew, doing a solo on the recorder. Am I correct? Is that what that is?
That is exactly right. It is the record hiring recorder, ripping that tune out. It's still
Are you kidding
going
me,
on.
dude, I have a piano and a kid that plays it. You know what that's like?
You have multiple children who are musically talented, and it's jarring being over there sometimes during the day. I've done 3 trips to Mexico recently, so
look at
it's
you.
basically, yeah. Here's my issue. Do you know how they scan your face? We talked about this with the passport and the app, and they don't even look at your passport anymore, the customs guy. Apparently, I had too much facial hair the day I took my passport photo, and so now it's not working every time that they scan me. The camera doesn't work.
How are you dealing with that? When that happens, do you actually have to pull your passport out of your pocket and present it to the customs
I have to
agent?
go inside. Everyone else just does it on the
you
plane.
do?
Yeah, it sucks.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's more of a big deal.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, do I grow my facial hair out to perfectly match my passport photo on my international flights? Do I update that in the ops manual? And the reason I bring this up is we had someone post a message online the other day asking about grooming in corporate aviation. I actually sent it to you and James because I thought it was so good.
Yeah, I don't believe this is real. I think you're.
No,
I think this
is
a
real.
Troll. I think you're
No,
trolling.
you think it's troll? It was on professional jet pilots. It says, honest question. If you have an upcoming interview with an airline or with corporate jets in this day and age, is it appropriate to have a neatly kept man bun? I have long hair and I'm ready to take the next step, but I'm getting conflicting answers on what is considered professional in 2023. Disclaimer, more than willing to chop it all off, but definitely prefer to keep it if it's acceptable. Thanks.
My advice would be that's totally acceptable. That's been good for 5 years at least, a man bun. I'm pretty
Pro
sure
man
actually
bun.
in the operations manual, it's clearly specified under the pilot grooming standards, man bun is acceptable as long as it fits under the hat. I think you're good.
Go for it. Man bun ahead. And then also acceptable for me to look like a really thick 5 o'clock shadow if it matches my passport photo.
Yeah. You know what else was cool? I think at the same time that got added to the ops manual was the authorization to wear a Darth Vader mask while you fly too, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Because you just
It's
get
good.
up and you greet the passenger. Welcome.
Well, doesn't it have a quick connect for the oxygen tube? So you're just ready
Yeah.
to go.
They demonstrated you could do it within the 5-second quick donning window. So
Perfect.
yeah, you're already ready. So.
Yeah, you're ready to go. Yeah.
I mean, there's a
Good.
lot
No
of things that have
stormtrooper.
happened that have changed in this day and age. The shortage of pilots. You cannot exclude people with man buns or Darth Vader masks any longer. So I think we're good.
Yeah. You're good.
What's next?
Go on. You could tie it all together and make the man bun into the Princess Leia bun. And then it'd be like the Darth Vader. You could get both.
That would be cool. The only thing that I did get called into the chief pilot's office for was I actually had lightning bolts shaved into the side of my head. That was the only fare that I had. And then I wore a cowboy hat. And
You didn't like that either, huh? Only company approved side
so
shaved
this
in
week,
logos.
I've got one of those Mexican wrestler masks.
Oh, luchador.
Yeah, what was that movie with Jack Black where he's Nacho Libre.
Nacho Libre.
Yeah,
Nacho
yeah,
Libre. That's
so
right.
I'm going to try that this week and see if I
Good.
can.
Okay. Report back.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Pushing the limits.
Yeah, there are some limits. Did you ever grow a mustache when you were at the airlines?
No. Like before it was a thing, we had the sweater mustache party.
Yeah.
That's the only time I think. Well, no, I take that back. During COVID, I didn't shave for quite some time, and it was terrible. And then remember for 4th of July, I shaved it all off, so I just had big redneck chops.
Oh,
and
yeah,
wore
I do
a
remember that.
America shirt and a trucker hat. It was awesome.
Yeah. There's the lesson. In this day and age where there's record pilot hiring, do whatever you want. You can do it all.
Speaking of live, Dylan, do you think we could have Gavin introduce the live Q&A flight advice with James O'Neill that we have planned?
Oh,
we could
man.
lead in with that, or do you think the pressure would get to him?
I think he would do it. He did that entire segment on the keyboard, and he didn't falter, so I think he's ready to go.
I don't know. Yeah.
Let's talk more about that. We're excited. May 24th, we are going to do live flight advice with James.
Give it our all.
Mm-hmm. With video.
No, that's why we got Joel. It'll happen now.
Yeah, it's going to happen now. I'm going to shave my facial hair exactly like my passport photo so that you guys can judge. Joel, can we do a live poll?
Well, wait a minute. Who told you that? The customs agent?
He says, because this has happened 3 times now, it won't match my photo. And he goes, maybe it's your facial hair.
So it's a maybe. It's not like, I sent that up to Washington and they use the recognition algorithm to determine.
I don't think Pete Buttigieg has made a ruling on it, no.
I don't think he's in charge of Customs and Border Patrol. So I don't know that that's really in his sphere of influence there.
Okay. It might be outside of it. That's a good point.
Commander Man Bun.
Okay.
We'll do it live.
All right. I'll research that one again.
We'll do it live. F it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
I can't wait to do it live. That,
Oh
if
my
you guys
gosh.
don't know what that is, that's Bill O'Reilly when he just lost it. And obviously it got recorded and spin around the internet about 5 million times if you missed that one. But
We are going to do it live. And let me tell you, when Max and James get together, it gets a little punchy. I think you're going to really enjoy watching their interaction live.
now you can't edit me. That's the best part. You guys are always
I know.
censored.
That's the best part. That'll be great. May 24th. If you've got a question for flight advice, we'll have a way where you can tune in live and write your question in. Also, if you want to send us an email or fill out the anonymous form on the website, we'll be asking a bunch of those. So if you're too afraid to share your name and reveal your identity like Mr. Man Bun, you can still get your questions asked. They'll be rapid fire. Should be a lot of fun. We'll see how many pilots we can help. Live. May 24th.
We'll do it live.
Basically, we've been trying to plan this for so long. That was our mantra to get this going.
Right. Yeah, make sure you check Gavin's calendar too.
I got to
make
check.
Sure he's...
We have the recording, so we'll be okay.
And you have to do a different song so that he can't be
He's got
accused of...
4 because he just did his recorder concert last week. So a lot of arrows in the quiver. Let's move on to reviews. Joel, what do we have? Has anyone been mentioning the show in any of the social media?
Oh, it's been all over. Here on Apple Podcast, how can I not give this podcast 5 stars when they read my first and only email to them? I asked a direct question regarding new regional pay in November 2022, and they read it on the first podcast of 2023. I've been listening to all the past episodes, and I bet the person in the car next to me was confused as I laughed and cried when I heard the furlough flute. Comic genius. Your information is priceless, and I eagerly await each episode. Keep it up. RTK 303048.
I like that.
I like that he eerily awaits each episode.
Is it ready yet?
Does he just feel he has to take a shower? Oh, it's just so dirty.
Is it done? Did you guys release it? Thank you for that review. We'll be happy to send you a sticker if you shoot us a...
When we're always like, oh, yeah, this one's going to be a little later. We're going to take a break. I'm like, nobody cares, dude. That's what I always say. Joel and Dylan always get all worried. I'm like, nobody cares. Nobody's sitting by their phone waiting for this to show up on Tuesday morning.
Some people are.
Somebody is eerily
See?
waiting for it.
Yeah. Here's my favorite review we got. Joel, you sent this to us via Reddit a few weeks ago. We forgot to put
Who's
this on there.
monitoring the 21.5 Reddit feed, Joel?
Nobody. That's why it was so funny. This guy was talking about all these different aviation podcasts, and this is the best review we've ever got. He said, 21.5 is my favorite. It's mainly focused on airline flying, but their main selling point is that the two hosts actually have a good rapport, sense of humor, and general social skills. I know it's an odd thing to highlight, but most hosts are super geeks who are boring as fuck to listen to. So
5 stars.
That about
5
sums
stars.
it up right there. We actually
yeah,
have social skills, it turns out.
yeah.
Dylan,
WAP,
that's why you've been so good with the
KA
ladies
pilot.
for so long.
That's right. Maybe we'll change the tagline of the show. For professional pilots by pilots with social skills. Thank you for sending that, Joel. That was fun.
That
We
is
got to get
funny.
on Reddit more often, I guess, and see what people are saying.
I think that was like from a year and a half ago or something like
That was so raw. So real.
Not exactly new.
That's okay. Well, if you wrote a review for the show, let us know via email, info@215podcast.com. We'll be happy to send you some stickers and just to say thank you for spreading the word. Reddit, Spotify, Apple, wherever you want to write a review. We certainly appreciate it.
Do we ever get any reviews from the Android podcast medium?
What is the Android podcast medium? Do you know?
It's Google Podcast.
Joel, are you monitoring Google Podcasts? by chance?
I am, but I haven't seen any.
It's 1% of all podcasts are played on there. It's pretty small.
I think my father listens to it on there.
That producer's a real piece of work. It's like Richard. Hey, Joel, this is your dad. If you've ever watched, if you guys have ever heard the Howard Stern show, you'll know what this is. Hey, Joel, this is your dad. We killed a possum last week. And your mom cooked it up. Anyway, great job on that 21.5 podcast or whatever you call it. Talk to you later.
Oh, man.
I think this is what Max thinks all Ohioans sound like, just so we know.
I'll be there tomorrow, Joel. I'll be making my entrance to Columbus, Ohio tomorrow evening.
This is very exciting.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
I have plans
Very-
to meet Joel. Joel goes, yeah, it's going to be great. You're going to be very surprised at how short I am. I was like, I hadn't crossed my mind, but now it's been on my mind since he said that. See.
This guy's short.
I'll
He's
give
really into Pilatus PC-12s. What's going on with this dude?
Giggity, Joel.
Sounds like Quagmire.
That's true.
All right.
What the heck? All right, let's move on to the mailbag. Of course, that's brought to you by friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy, aircrewacademy.com, to see all of the offerings they have for your flight department's training needs. Winter is pretty much done, although I saw a couple people post pictures of snow the other day, and we're ready for summer.
Yeah,
They have
I
the
gave a dude
modules.
a weird look wearing the winter coat in the terminal the other day. I'm like, bro,
yeah.
where?
No more. Go short sleeve.
It's over. It's over.
That's right. That's right. That means it's time to fire the weather radar up, of course. And if you need a little refresher on that weather radar, you can listen to our episode with Dan Bodenheimer from Advanced Aircrew Academy, where we give a little refresher on how to use that thing. What is stabilization? Should you tilt it at the ground?
Have you ever wondered what that gain knob is actually for?
What is gain? The ground mapping mode. Aircrewacademy.com to see all of the modules available for you to educate yourself. And I'm also going to post a link to their latest blog post, or one of their latest blog posts, but the old SMS mandate, which is
looming?
It's going to be a real situation. Are you in compliance? This blog post will definitely let you know.
How many people just went, what SMS
SMS
mandate?
You mean like the text message?
If you're a Part 91 flight department manager and you have no idea what the SMS mandate is, head over to advancedaircrewacademy.com.
Each SMS must include systematic procedures, practices, and policies for safe risk management. That's just a little tidbit, little teaser there. All right, on to the mailbag. Thank you, Advanced Aircrew Academy. What do we got, Joel?
Hey guys, I've been thinking about ways to give back and volunteer in ways that involve flying and haven't come up with anything. Wondering if anyone has any experience or ideas. I know there are people that transport rescue pets, but most seem to have their own airplane, which I do not. Trying to find a way to do some good with what I have, which isn't much more than my hands and feet. Any advice would be great. Remember, Pratt & Whitney J58 engines are the key to air power. Ryan.
I don't get that.
We should probably edit this because I don't know what airplanes have the Pratt & Whitney J.
I think, no, we shouldn't edit this. You should know this. I believe that it's on the B-52, right? If this is wrong, then we are going to edit this.
Yeah.
Oh, no, the
okay.
SR-71.
SR-71.
Okay. Yeah, we are.
Okay.
All right, good idea, Dylan. Let's edit this one.
Max, the J58 engine, of course, everyone knows that that's in the SR-71 Blackbird.
You know, I can tell you an interesting fact, though, about the J58, Dylan, if you'd like.
Please, go ahead.
Do you know how they started a J58? They didn't have an APU. There wasn't a starter generator on that horse.
because it's a pull start, right? So then they would tie it up to like a motorcycle and then you try and drive it off to the side.
No, they used an air
No?
impingement start. No, I'm kidding. They had a start cart, but it was a Chevy 350 V8 motor, and it had a shaft that plugged into the bottom or the side or whatever of the motor, and it would actually mechanically spin the motor up.
Oh, wow.
I was not reading this from the internet, so you can fact check me, but
So like a direct drive start.
yeah. And I want to say at the Peter Air and Space Museum, you were just there. Didn't they have that starting cart?
They might have missed that. What happens if the starting cart doesn't disengage?
They just go.
Overspeed your Chevy engine.
Yeah, it
No
was.
problem.
It was a Buick 401 cubic inch V8 with automatic transmission driving a gearbox. I wonder if some dude sat there was like,
Shifting. Fifth gear. We're almost there.
dude,
More
it had a
fuel.
transmission on it. Yeah. Well,
Oh,
anyway,
man. That's great. I love it. All right, Ryan. Well, thanks for writing in. Hope that advice is helpful to you on where to find a volunteer job. Thanks. Just kidding. Ryan, so this is a tough one because I've seen a lot of people struggle with this because they want to volunteer, but they want to volunteer in aviation, and certain places that's just not possible. So I would say my first piece of advice is I would broaden my scope outside of aviation and try and plug into something that you can actually get involved with. The most accessible and most practical, especially for pilots with varying schedules where you don't have to commit way out.
Dylan, thank you for that extraordinarily broad advice there. Basically applies to anybody wanting to volunteer.
No. Branch out from aviation. Here's an easy one that is in pretty much every city, a food bank. Those are usually very easy. You can just show up. You don't have to have any skill. They always need help. And there's probably likely one in your town. You're probably super low commitment, but a good place to get your feet wet. Max, go ahead. With all your volunteer experience, go ahead, Max.
Thank you, Dylan. I will. So I volunteer in something called Sky Kids, and I do that with the airplane that I own, a lot of times on their first flight, and take them on this track that we have. But while if you don't have your airplane, you can't necessarily volunteer to fly. But I'll tell you what we do need at those events all the time that I do personally volunteer at, Dylan. You need people with aviation experience to help because it's a lot of airplanes moving and people moving back and forth. And so if you are a pilot, just because you're not flying doesn't mean you don't know how a ramp works. And so we always need people on the ramp to help marshal people. There's like weight and balance where they pair the total weight of the passengers to the correct airplane, which is a big deal. That's all run by pilots or retired pilots. So if you can find something, even though you don't have an airplane, I wouldn't immediately turn your back because there may be other things where you can use your aviation knowledge to help and volunteer.
100%. That's a great point. Yeah, I actually had the Sky Kids website up and was going to mention that. Unfortunately, it looks like this one's only in Arizona.
Yeah, it's only in Arizona, I think, but I'm sure there's similar things. And if there isn't one,
yeah,
maybe reach out to Sky
you
Kids
can talk
and
to folks.
emulate what
Yeah.
they do because it's an awesome program. It's super popular. We fly our butts off that day, everybody, like as long as we stay and we fly until there's nobody left to give a ride to.
Yep.
It's fun. It's awesome. Very rewarding.
Special and rewarding event.
And it's cool. I bring my kids out, my wife. They don't fly because I need every seat for the passengers, but they do the whole thing and they give safety briefings, make sure everyone's buckled in, the whole thing. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. No, I was just giving you a hard time. Hats off. That is a really cool thing that you're involved in. So there are definitely ways you can get involved if you don't have an airplane, but recognizing that depending on where you live, that could be challenging. I would encourage you to potentially look outside of aviation if need be. All right, what's next, Joel?
Daryl says, I discovered your podcast 3 weeks ago, and I can't stop listening. I started with episode 1 and just finished episode 22. You and your guest have really opened my mind, and I've even reached out to Raven Careers for some advice. I decided to write because you mentioned United's Aircrew Academy in your last episode, which I'm currently attending, and have an aviation license plate to share. Thank you for the content. I'm really looking forward to hearing the pandemic
Daryl,
episodes.
if you didn't know what the furlough flute was from what we talked about earlier, you're going to find out when you listen to those
This way you'll know when
episodes.
when it comes back around. When we have to shelve the record pilot hiring recorder and bring this. This is one of those times when I think, and I'm like, I wonder if everyone else thinks this is funny as we do.
Yeah.
Because
Maybe the third
Sometimes
time.
they worry like we're totally missing it. People are like shaking their heads right now. They're being like, "What idiot? Whatever. What do we care?"
Good luck at the Aviate Academy, Daryl, and keep us posted on what that training's like. It'll be really cool to see. I mean, I imagine this is kind of the first wave of people that are starting probably at zero through these academies and going all the way up, possibly to United. So hopefully the hiring continues and you'll be at United soon.
Hi, Max and Dylan. I wanted to leave a review on y'all's podcast, but I guess Spotify doesn't do that, so I just left a rating. 5 out of 5, love the show. Been listening for about a year now and use your show to drown out my commuting sorrows. I was hoping you could recommend an episode of yours where you talk specifically to young pilots about flying the odd jobs and not going straight to the airlines at 23. I have a few fellow CFIs who are laser focused on nothing but the airlines and that elusive seniority number and won't bother looking at other potential aviation jobs, and I feel like they are closing themselves off to good experiences at a young age. Disclaimer, I'm 32, spent 8 years in the military, and still want to try other jobs before committing to the airlines, so maybe I'm biased. Sorry for the long email. You guys are awesome. Keep up the good work. Also, a sticker to throw on my hydro flask would be pretty sweet. Respectfully, Nicholas.
So I was thinking about this the other day about some of that advice we give. And sometimes I go back and forth from like, wow, is that because at the airlines, seniority is everything, is paramount, right? It controls everything. How much you get paid your whole life, your schedule, everything. And so, yeah, if you are laser focused as a CFI, do whatever you can to get to the airlines the quickest, that's certainly a benefit. And we've also talked about if you actually love aviation and it's really your passion, like there are a lot of other things you can do that are interesting and more exciting on your way there. And I listened to this podcast the other day about a dude that wrote a book about living your life to maximum fulfillment, right? And what people look back at when they're old and they've lived most of their life, they look back at like the experiences that they had. And, people rarely care about how much money they have in the bank at the end of the day. And this guy was advocating, a lot of people actually save and have enough money for retirement. A lot of times they underspend because they're so worried about saving, right? And when your kids are growing up, they'll forego taking that big vacation instead of to fully fund their IRA or whatever it is. And it turns out that those experiences, when you look back, are awesome. They really give you maximum fulfillment to your life. And the thing is that you have different windows of life. Like going back to the kids analogy, there's only so much time your kids are between the ages of 5 and 10 years old. And there's certain things you can do at that point. And after that time is gone. That's perishable. It's just like, backpacking through Europe with your buddies when you're in college and you're broke and you're staying in hostels. That is a different trip. And you're like, oh, well, I'll go back to Europe. Maybe I'll do that now. And you're staying at the JW Marriott. It's still nice. It's still great, but it's a different trip. And you can never go back to staying in hostels and living out of a backpack and riding in trains everywhere. That is perishable, right? And aviation is similar in that seniority is great and all of that at the airlines, but 5 years in, whatever, and you've flown to Poughkeepsie for the 9,000th time and it's kind of worn off, you'll look back and be like, what did I really do? Like I flew an RJ and then I came here and I flew this and that's it. And if that's good and that's your goal and that brings you, but I think my point is you have to stop and think about it. And like, you only have one shot at life as a whole, and you only have one shot at that point in your aviation career, whether that's right after flight instructing and you have the opportunity to go to Alaska and fly the bush or fly corporate on a 550 and go all over the place, not just Zurich and Paris and London and whatever. That time period is perishable. You only have one shot. You can't just go back when you retire and go fly the bush to Alaska. It just doesn't work that way generally. So a long answer to your shorter question, but the point is you have to seriously sit there and consider, like, at this phase in my life, what at the end of the day will bring me maximum fulfillment to my life. And oftentimes that is not money. So
100%.
We'll put a link to this podcast too, if you really want to dive a little deeper.
What show is that, Max?
That was on Peter Attia, The Drive, and the guy was a hedge fund. He traded natural gas futures and stuff. And Bill Perkins is his name. And he wrote a book called Die with Zero. And that's what his philosophy is like. Look, dying with money doesn't do anything. You're not giving away money that people are going to give it to till you die. It's very interesting analysis of life and thinking about it rather than getting stuck on autopilot and going to work and doing whatever you do and not really thinking about it intentionally.
It's hard, especially if you have not done it yet. But to explain the monotony of that being a professional pilot can be after a few years, it's hard to convey that to someone that hasn't done it. But I mean, even if you did fun flying jobs until you're 30, it's still 35 years of flying at a major airline. That's a long time.
I'll tell you what, though. One thing that you may forget about, too, sometimes is that there are things at the airlines that are not monotonous, whereas corporate is. Corporate, you fly with the same other pilot all the time.
Yep.
And at the airlines, it's always someone new. You always have something interesting to talk about. And some people you can shoot the breeze for on a 3-day the whole time, and it's entertaining. And some people you don't vibe with quite as well. But that part of it I really enjoy. It's like, and everybody knows more about something than you do. And it's interesting to learn from people about what they're into, what they're interested in, even if it's stuff you're not really that interested in.
And I'm not even saying corporate for this. I'm just saying, like, if you do some adventure and unique jobs in your 20s and then go get a real job when you turn 30, that's still 35 years of.
The thing is, though, we talk about this in our early 40s.
Yeah.
Like, at 25, it's hard to wrap your head around that whole thing. But this guy is a perfect example, is thinking about it, right? Yeah. And I know, like Christian, who I fly with on the corporate side, he's thinking about this. He's doing things and trying to have experiences and waiting a little bit before he hangs it up, because the problem at the airlines, obviously, is it's very hard to leave once you're there because you're locked in and things continue to get better. And there's always the carrot. And so, which is great. And don't get me wrong, I do not regret going to the airlines and anything. It's one of the greatest jobs there is. But on the way there, if the only thing you're thinking about is seniority, you're missing the big picture.
Okay. 100%.
We'll do it live. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Hey guys, love the show, and I was graced to hear the sweet, sweet tones of Ted's voice on with Washington Center as he was trying to improve his holding instructions on Saturday. I bet the cockpit audio would have been amazing. Thanks for all you do. Chip.
Well, Chip, we did attempt to verify this report with Ted, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this was not Ted. He was 2 feet firmly planted on the terra firma that day.
Also, Ted would have never accepted holding instructions to begin with. That was the other red flag I had there. So
he would have gone, so watch this, and squawk 7600 and proceeded direct to the final approach fix.
Yeah, just.
I can't. We're going to do it live. Can't wait.
That's right.
James.
Can't wait.
Moving on. Just wondering if you could do a little tax segment with Timothy P. Pope about the intricacies of commuting pilots and bases and where state taxes are required to be paid. I'm a Tennessee resident based in CLT and have heard North Carolina has some strict state tax laws. I'm also a long-term reserve pilot. Read that as DEC, and may have a room rented in an airport car for when I'm in town. Thanks, Eric.
I actually asked him about this. He gave us a referral to a tax specialist that can help. This is actually a Delta pilot at Positive Rate Tax Advisors. So we'll have a link in the show notes for that. And Tim says, usually financial planners refer folks to specific tax planning strategy expert. So that's what you need to do.
Riveting. Joel?
Riveting.
Back at it. Dylan and Max, longtime listeners since way back in 2019-ish when he interviewed my fellow LA Tech alumnus, John Peroya from Find a Pilot. We always end the show with a quote from your former Air Force ERA mentor. Flexibility is the key to air power. Just had a random thought from my own military career on the naval side that had never before occurred to me. We had a peculiarly similar saying in the Navy and Marine Corps, but we deferred to the more concise, bastard Latin version, Semper Gumby, evoking the flexible early 70s Saturday morning TV character. But the effect is very nearly the same. You'll have to forgive my slow-moving mental processes on this after transitioning from a FW career over to the helo world where the everything moves at 105 indicated airspeed or less. It affects the brain, you know. You guys rock. Keep doing what you do. And until the next 21.5 episode, remember, Semper Gumby. Clark. Also, the new guy does sound like Quagmire. Thanks.
All right, Joel. Quagmire. There you go. Giggity giggity. Can you give us a giggity giggity?
Giggity giggity.
All right, last one. Finish up.
Gents, I really enjoyed your recent Headset Showdown podcast and like to add my 2 cents on the fit of my Clarity Aloft. I can see how the band hitting the headrest could be annoying, but with my massive 7 3/4 melon, they're a perfect fit, just barely protruding from the back of my head. The only complaint I have is the clamping force on my Mega Nugget is bothersome. After a couple hours, if I'm using them for GA flying, it's not an issue at my 121 job since we go topless above flight level 180. Keep up the good work. Yours is my go-to podcast for the commute. Tailwinds. Marcus, going topless.
It's funny because we always are so down on commuting, but it turns out probably most of our listeners,
Exactly.
because of commuting, are our listeners. So we're probably shooting ourselves in the foot by encouraging people not to commute.
That's how you get loyal listeners. You speak to, they're like, yeah, it is awful. Correct.
Yeah. Didn't we already go over this in the Clarity Loft?
No, because didn't you bend your headset? Didn't somebody, was it him
that's
that
what I
emailed
thought
and
we said that. But
said
anyway,
bend your
yeah, it's
headset?
just a metal band. You just bend it out until the clamping force is minimal. Because, well, I'll put it this way. The Bose gives me headache after wearing it for a long time in the GA airplane, but wearing the Clarity Loft, which I do wear it the entire time at work, which is way longer in a given week than on GA. I never get the clamping issue. So, but I suppose if you're leaning your head back against the headrest, I just don't do that, I don't think, for whatever reason.
Yeah. We got an A30 update from our buddy, Max. He texted us.
Yeah.
A30 update, slightly more comfortable. Every other aspect sucks. Cord too long. Cord's not as tough. No quieter, maybe louder. Audio quality not even close to A20 for movies/music. Not even as good for air traffic control comms. I'd pay $500 more for a brand new A20 than these. Wow. Yet to really hear a resounding endorsement from any listeners on the A30s. So hopefully folks saved their shekels on that one. And that's going to do it for the mailbag. Thanks to everyone who wrote in. Hopefully you found some of this information helpful. I know I learned a lot about how to start an SR-71 engine. You can reach us at info@215podcast.com, where an email will be responded to by a host with social skills, we promise. And if you need to get a hold of us anonymously, it's 215podcast.com on the website, and you can click the flight advice form and send us something that way. Thanks to Advanced Aircrew Academy for their longtime partnership of the mailbag, although I sometimes wonder if they question that, some of the tangents that we're going through. But
What are we paying for here?
what exactly is this?
Where did this recorder come from? What is this?
Is that really his son? All right, let's jump into this interview with Brooks with Vaerus Aviation. Max, I think folks are really going to enjoy learning a little bit about Brooks' perspective in aircraft buying and selling. You're going to learn something. Here we go. Max, we are so excited today. Brooks Pettit, he's the president of Vaerus Aviation, and Vaerus Jet Sales has kindly offered to join our program and enlighten us on all sorts of topics, aircraft sales, management, maybe most importantly, the DC-3, which we're excited to chat about. Welcome to the program, Brooks.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Brooks, we've got so much that we want to talk to you about, but I think it would be interesting. You know, we started this podcast in 2019, and our very first episode was aircraft sales. That was 99 episodes ago, and we haven't talked about it since. And a lot has changed, and so we thought it'd be good to revisit the topic. Interest rates, bonus depreciation, so much has changed over the past few years, and people want business jets. They're hard to find.
And the market as a whole.
Yeah, exactly.
When you weren't able to buy a business jet.
Sure.
I mean, besides that, a couple other
Yeah,
things.
a lot has changed. So we'd love to chat a little bit with you about the marketplace, what you see out there, and maybe if there's a better way to do deals. So start us off with a little bit, maybe a little general analysis. Tell us, what's it like to buy a business jet in 2023?
Well, I'd lead off by saying, man, I wish we could go back to 2018 and 2019 when there was a balanced market and there were people willing to sell airplanes and people willing to buy airplanes, and interest rates were good, and MROs had time in their shops to put airplanes in for pre-buys, and the title companies didn't have to schedule closings out. You could call them and say, hey, we're going to close tomorrow, and they'd give you 2 thumbs up, and none of that stuff happens right now. And that's the tough part just in general about the business, is that it just takes a lot more horsepower to get deals done in today's climate. It seems to be getting better, but certainly it's taking a lot more horsepower than it used to.
But I guess on the flip side, it's also better than 2008, right? When it was crickets. So,
well, let's talk about the difference between 2008 and what we're seeing right now. Probably to lead off the conversation, this is a really fascinating fact. There's a big difference between the supply and demand ratio. When you looked at the years leading up to 2008, there was just an insatiable demand for business airplanes, and people just couldn't get enough of them. So the manufacturers, not battling any supply chain issues, not battling any manufacturing constraints, they just ramped up production. And so the consumers wanted airplanes, and so the manufacturers just built more airplanes. And so then 2008 happens, and the economy goes into a spiral downhill and follows the business jet pricing market as well. Airplanes, ended up being 40 to 50 to 60% of what they would have sold for in previous years. But percentage of new, these airplanes ended up hovering around half of what they should have. That if you go back and look at the historical value trends, my gosh, I just couldn't imagine owning one of these assets and then seeing that graph of my value of my asset. And frankly, for people that finance airplanes, you ended up so upside down, it created all kinds of problems in the marketplace. And I don't know that it was necessarily by design, but if you compare that to where we see today over the global pandemic, the 2020 pandemic, is manufacturing didn't pick up pace with the demand for business aircraft.
Brooks, wait, are you suggesting that the manufacturers are controlling supply to keep prices higher?
Well, I don't want to be hung out to dry by the manufacturers, but I will lead off by saying I think that actually is a good thing. And just like if you're looking at buying a vehicle and you're concerned about its future value, you're going to look at what is this vehicle going to be worth 5 years down the road. So if you're concerned about residual value, you go buy a Honda Accord, right? Because Hondas hold their value, they last forever, that sort of thing. And the manufacturers did a really nice job, and I'm not sure that it was necessarily completely on purpose, but dealing with the supply chain demand, that maybe they wouldn't have had the opportunity to increase production at a rate to keep up with pace. But I think that worked out to be a really good thing, in that now we all feel like the values of business aircraft are stupid high, and they're really expensive. The reality, in my opinion, is that the residual values of those airplanes are what they should be, which is important to a consumer that is buying an airplane and going to hold the airplane for 3 or 4 or 5 years and then sell it or trade it for something else. You don't want the value of your asset to decrease by, double-digit numbers per year. So for there to be a balanced market over the course of the lifetime of your ownership of an airplane or a fleet of airplanes, they need to have a predictable depreciation rate. We're back to pricing that makes sense with a linear depreciation rate on what a business airplane kind of should be, and that 3 to 4, 5%, kind of per year kind of number. Another interesting fact is that historically speaking, and this might actually counterpredict what I just got done talking about. So an interesting fact is that over the course of the last few decades, 80% of the transactional volume of business aircraft have been traded by owners that already previously own another airplane. So they buy a new airplane, then they have a used one that goes back into the inventory in the global market of aircraft sales. Whether they're buying a new one or a slightly used one and trading in a little older used one, or trading up or trading down, but somewhere, somehow, there's a piece of inventory going back into the marketplace. During the pandemic, that number flipped. So we saw this big rush. We saw, all the jet cards, the charter operators, fractional programs just have a huge demand. So obviously they consumed some airplanes out of inventory, but the ratio switched from 80% of airplane owners having something to put to replenish the market. Even if a King Air owner is going to a Citation, or, a Citation owner going to Challenger, there's something going back in the market, and there's a buyer for that something that went back in the market. That ratio flipped. And that's where we saw that just immediate dry up of inventory, is that now 80% of the transactions were happening with new airplane buyers, first-time airplane buyers. And those percentages may be just a little bit off. And we might see that kind of flip back the other direction, that you have buyers that got in the market, they start seeing the expenses on their P&L and the asset on their balance sheet, and realizing maybe we didn't need this whole airplane. We'll go back to, doing something different. But
Yeah, I was being facetious about, the manufacturers controlling supply, but it's better for the market because who's going to buy a new airplane if you're going to lose half of its value in a few years? Like that makes it inordinately more expensive on the exit, right? So I can see what you're saying is it's good, obviously, for the manufacturers, but it's good for everybody because it keeps everything stable. And you would think you're going to sell less airplanes maybe initially if you do that to keep prices high, but I think it's kind of the opposite, right? Where people feel more comfortable buying when they know they're not going to lose. They have a predictable depreciation rate. Because that's what I've always said too, is that a lot of people, when they buy airplanes, they're so concerned with the operating cost, right? The fixed costs, the direct operating costs, all of these things, how much the airplane's going to cost to buy. And I feel like one thing that's always overlooked is the exit strategy on the asset, right?
Right.
Because you can have people that are so worried and they want to charter to offset costs and this, that, and then they end up losing $10 million in the back end. And you're like, if you divide that over the 5 years you own the airplane, like that was way more than all these other costs you spent 90% of your time focusing on. So how do you counsel buyers about the soup to nuts whole circle of that airplane ownership?
Well, so I'll respond to that by saying that we all know that for there to be a marketplace or for airplanes to exist, right, they have to continue to be manufactured. Someone out there has to buy brand new airplanes. Otherwise, the whole ecosystem of the business jet market ceases to exist because the airplanes will get to the point where their life cycle maintenance doesn't make sense to keep maintaining them anymore. And there has to be a newer model always coming about. Otherwise, there will be attrition. There have been many years where it's been very, very difficult to make a value proposition for new airplanes. And the good thing about the business jet market is that there will always be new airplane buyers. There will always be those people that say, I am going to own a new airplane. I want a new airplane and I want it to be under warranty. I recognize that the depreciation scale may be substantially higher than a 5 or 10-year-old airplane that fundamentally will do the same mission, absent the conversation of new models and that sort of thing. But thank God for all of us that we have people out there that demand buying new airplanes because we need those people for the rest of the ecosystem to work. Right. For a number of years, 8 or 10 years, the value proposition simply, it just didn't pencil. So if you're looking at it from just a simple dollars and cents standpoint, especially if you're building a true cost analysis, what that airplane is going to cost, not in a 6-month snippet or a 12-month snippet of here's our fixed expenses and our operating expense and salaries or payroll, and that's what it's going to cost. The reality is that that's one leg of the equation, but so much more goes into the actual ownership cost from day one to the time of the eventual sale that you really need to look at the depreciation schedule. And there's 3 different types of depreciation. So the depreciation we're talking about is market depreciation, and that's not tax depreciation. It's not book depreciation. It is the value that you pay for the airplane minus the value that you sell it for. And if you include those numbers into the actual operating cost, none of us really want to look at that. But it is an important way of setting a new airplane versus a used airplane versus a 10-year-old or 15-year-old airplane together.
Well, my friend Dylan has a really great saying about this. He says, there's only one reason we all don't own one of these. Only one.
Just one thing holding me back from getting
only
an XLS.
Only one thing holding me back from that 650.
Just one last detail. One last detail my wife and I are going to figure out.
I've got it all figured out. Yeah. I read all the pilot training, all the experience. It's just that one last piece of the puzzle.
That's right.
Just can't quite get there.
That's right.
So Brooks, I think you bring up a good point, as you talk about all of these different things that you have to look at for ownership and depreciation and operating costs and all this. But at some point, just in your experience when you work with clients, do you see people dig too deep into the numbers? And you say, at some point, right, the cost is the cost of owning an airplane. And you do obviously have to be educated when you go into these deals. But no matter what you forecast and your software forecast, market forecast, things change, right? So you could say, well, the residual value is going to be this, but I mean, look at what's happened in the last 5 years. No one could have predicted any of this. So there is risk still in going in there. And part of it is sort of your commitment to just owning the airplane, right?
I would very much agree with that. And I would respond by saying the one thing I've learned in 20 or more years of doing this is that I've stopped trying to predict the emotion of an airplane owner. We all have emotions. We have emotions about why we buy a certain car, boat, or whatever it is. And airplane owners have all sorts of different reasons that they choose to buy, to go down a certain path. And I am often very, very surprised by someone who I thought was just happened the other day. I have a good client of mine, good friend of mine. We went from a PC-12 to a Piper Meridian. And then all of a sudden, I thought we might kind of tiptoe back into, let's go buy a nice 5-year-old PC-12. And he comes knocking on my door and says, I want a brand new PC-24. And just kind of knocked my socks off. And that doesn't fit the upgrade path. That you look at the data in JetNet and you'd never, ever see a Piper Meridian owner going to a PC-24, a brand new one. And he didn't want to use one. He wanted a brand new one. And the emotion of that whole process changed. I mean, I've been with them for 10 years and that process changes over time. And the answer is that there's no right answer for the right person at that right specific time. It is a moving target, moving pendulum. I'm not sure I actually answered your question, though.
No, I think that's a slightly different, but also equally important point. Things change with aircraft owners too, right? Oh, we just sold our business. Now things have changed. We want something
Right.
completely different as a curveball.
Right.
But also, I mean, when it comes to forecasting, there's only so much you can do, right? I mean, that's the challenge.
I have this conversation all the time with our clients, and all that I can offer to you is the age of the model. I can show you, here's historically what this has looked like. And you can see over the years the ebbs and flows and the dips. But generally speaking, the big influencer is the global liquidity market. And what is the general economy? What does global liquidity look like? And that's probably a bigger driving force to the future value of airplanes than looking at a small snippet of a Citation XLS. Now, we could predict to a higher degree of certainty on certain models of airplanes than we could on others. I'm just going to dive into that for just a quick second. So if you're asking me, if you're John Smith and you've got a company that needs a business airplane and you say, well, what airplane should I buy to protect the future value of my asset? My general answer is going to be, first, we're going to look at manufacturers that are current production airplanes. We're going to look at fleet size. So if you take, say, a Citation XLS or Challenger 300, both just really strong performing airplanes, they're really good in the market segment that they do. They have an incredible amount of product support, parts availability, all of those, parts availability, service organizations. How many training centers are there? Can our pilots get trained? All of those things, believe it or not, those things go into the value of the asset. And the general answer is that in times of a market where you don't necessarily know what's going to happen, we want to make sure that we're in an airplane that has strength in numbers. Citations and say a Challenger, we've got 1,000 units out there or more, and the same with the XLS fleet. There's a ton of those airplanes out there. It's not saying those are the only two airplanes, but they have a strong support network, and that lends to a lesser of a dip when the dip occurs. They're going to retain value better than, take a Lear 45, for example. Wonderful airplane, was a venerable competitor to the Citation XL, and that was a Ford or Chevy conversation for many years. And the reality is the XL won. If you look at the residual values of the 560 XL fleet, they're so much stronger than the Lear 45 when they were priced mostly the same for many years. The demand was the same, and then something happened. Learjet stopped building the Lear 45. And that means that when a manufacturer stops building an airplane, there is a point where the product support gets more and more difficult. And that means that the cost of operating the airplane is higher, and the enjoyment of the asset gets lower, meaning we're down, we need a windshield, and we can't get one for 60 days, sort of thing. And then all of a sudden, an owner says, I've owned this airplane for 10 years. It's been good to us, but I'm not going to put up with product support, parts availability, those sorts of things. And so we're going to make a change to a model that has strength in numbers and current production.
It's the same thing. What's going through my head is like, what you're describing is then you go buy a Toyota or a Honda versus something not as plentiful or buy a different manufacturer that doesn't make as many cars or have as many dealerships or whatever. So Brooks, I want to play a game with you real quick. I'm going to name an airplane, and I want you to equate it to a car based on those kind of metrics. So if like we say the Citation XLS, you say, okay, that's a 4Runner or whatever, right? Like a Toyota. And if you say, what about the Hawker 4000? What would you say that is?
So the Hawker 4000 is a Range Rover pickup truck that doesn't exist, that is impossible to buy parts for, and they made 35 of them, and nobody that owns them really wants them anymore. They look great sitting in the garage, but they can't ever be operated because nobody's trained to operate them. Nobody knows how to start them, and really nobody understands how the computer systems work to make them go.
And they both share that British electrical system. It's a
Yes.
nightmare, right?
Yeah.
What about Gulfstream 3? What would you say that is?
Oh my gosh. Why can't we lead off with the obvious answers?
I know, because these are the ones I really want to know what you're going to say. I think that would be like a what's like a muscle car that is still very reliable, but
Lear
it's just
60.
old.
The Lear 60, that's a muscle car for sure. I mean, an airplane that you can point the airplane almost straight up and it'll go wherever you point it. That's pretty cool. You know that G3 is that expensive Ferrari that burns a lot of gas and you have to change the tires every 8,000 miles and only, I don't know where I'm going with that, but
you can pick it up for 20 grand.
Yeah, exactly. Can't afford to insure it or operate it, but you can afford to buy them cheap.
That kind of leads me into my next question about being in aircraft sales, because you must have this conversation a million times. Somebody that you know sends you a listing for a, Hawker 800 with timed out engines or something like that. And like, look, we can get into this thing for, $3 million or whatever. And you kind of probably have to get on your soapbox and say the same things over and over again. So how often are you having to counsel people in that, like, yeah, I know it's not very expensive to buy, but it just seems like it's going to be repetitive.
Well, so I'm going to lead off by saying that over the years, I too have fallen victim of not paying attention to my own advice. Over the years, I've bought airplanes for that reason, thinking, hey, the cost of entry is low, and I'm smart enough. I can outperform the actual cost of operating it. I know how to do this better than everybody else. So when I go buy an airplane for our personal use or family use, and I've been bitten. My case is 421's got a great cabin, but you look at the book numbers, you say, it is not possible that airplane costs that much money per hour to operate. And even doing it in-house with our own maintenance staff and support, it costs double what the book says.
Oh my gosh.
So my response is pretty candid, and it's almost like reciting lines from a high school musical or play that you had memorized because you are reciting the words to a song. But the reality is in my equation, when I tell people, is this is a square root equation. If you think about what causes an airplane to climb, so an airplane to be able to climb has to have a certain amount of horsepower, right? It has to have, a level flight. It can reach a point of level flight with a certain amount of horsepower, but if you want to go any higher, it takes more horsepower to climb. Horsepower equates to airspeed, which creates the lift. And, we all know how the aerodynamics of that works. But it's the same equation when you're talking about airplanes and money. A certain model of airplane at a certain age range and maintenance life cycle, it takes a certain amount of money to make the airplane fly. Money and horsepower are direct derivatives or equivalents of each other in this case. At the end of the day, there is a reason that these airplanes are all priced accordingly, and that somebody smarter than all of us recognizes that when I look at buying an airplane, and let's say I want to buy a brand new PC-24 versus a 20-year-old beach jet, somebody is looking at that and they're looking at the pro forma and realizing for the cost of the maintenance life cycle, I can put that same money into amortization expense or the cost of capital, however you're paying cash or whatever, and I can get a better enjoyment out of a newer model airplane. It'll go when I press the start button. It's going to burn less gas. Its maintenance costs are going to be lower. It's just a simple math equation. There is a reason that airplanes have, and it's not a direct linear scale either. If you look at as airplanes start depreciating in value over time, it doesn't start at A and go to B and you draw a line with a ruler. It has kind of a sine wave like waves in the ocean does. And you see a big drop on the front end, and that's the market depreciation of a brand new airplane. And then you see it all kind of level out for the next 5 to 7 years, 10 years. And then all of a sudden you get to that point where we're going to talk about engine programs here, but certainly airplanes that are not on engine programs, you reach a point where you look at the life cycle maintenance just doesn't make sense to put, this is a bad analysis, but I always tell everybody, you reach a point where you're remodeling your mobile home trailer with granite countertops. And that's just not, there's a point where you just stop spending money on it. That's why you see old beach jets and old Lears and, old Hawkers in the junkyard now.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So, Brooks, if you have somebody that comes to you that wants to buy an airplane, you go through all of the expenses and all of the stuff that we've been talking about buying and owning this airplane, and then they say, well, now, Brooks, is getting pilots going to be a problem? What do you say?
Yes.
Wait, do you say it just like that?
Yes, I do actually. So this is when we go into a counseling session, and I flip that back the other direction, and I start asking questions about what kind of owner are you going to be? Who do you want to employ as pilots? Who do you want up front? And how are you going to be to work for? If we can check the boxes that someone's going to be responsible about compensation, responsible about quality of life, responsible about maintaining an airplane and taking really good care of it, especially right now, pilots want to fly machines that work. You don't want to be faced with, do I make the right decision or the wrong decision to save money and that sort of thing. So our organization, we have 2 companies and we do have a management company. We've not had trouble employing pilots, even throughout the entirety of the pandemic. But we've tried really hard to be that kind of organization that people want to work for. And we don't keep all of our clients for that reason. We only permit the customers that are going to be good to our people. And so even as corporate operations have mass exodus to the airlines and that sort of thing, we've been able to retain our pilots. Most of our pilots have been here for 6, 7, 8, 9 or more years. And I think that's because we have good owners. So the answer to that in a roundabout way is with a management company or you're doing it on your own, hiring your own pilots, it's just like a marriage. It is for a marriage to remain happy and healthy. Both people have to work at it. And the airplane owner has to work at providing the environment that is conducive for longevity of employment. Being predictable and stable, probably more than anything, is recognizing that pilots are human beings and not robots and machines, and making sure that they are able to commit to all the other people in their lives, their spouses and kids and that sort of thing.
Well said. Yeah, and to your point, as someone that's an aircraft owner, those things may not be obvious if they're not coached and counseled. I mean, because there's so many things going on in an aircraft transaction. That's typically one of the kind of the last pieces of the puzzle that I think a lot of owners would figure out is, okay, let's get the airplane, then we'll figure out kind of everything else. And it's, you got to have a real holistic view in this day and age, I think, to be able to, you're the linchpin to the whole operation in a way, especially if you're self-managing it or you're a big part of the operation as the pilot, and it's, you bought the elephant, you can't choke on the cost of peanuts, as they say.
I'm going to reuse that one, Dylan. I like that.
This guy, he's full of these one-liners. Yeah. It's unbelievable. But the other thing, too, is that there's a value proposition to that, too, that, it might cost you a little more to pay better and give people time off and pay for contract pilots or whatever. But there's a value proposition there in training, right? Because turnover is expensive. So how do you address this training issue with these people that you're going to sell an airplane to? And maybe they have pilots already from their upgrading, say, but there's this big training problem. And it's like, how do you forecast an airplane you don't necessarily have identified yet? So you don't necessarily know when he's going to acquire it or she, but you have to plan to have somebody to fly it. And the training is backed up for over a year on some type. So like, how do you manage that quagmire of?
That's tough for an operator or an owner that is buying a new airplane and they don't have a crew in place already. That answer is maybe a little easier in that you start seeking airmen who already have type ratings in the airplane. Obviously, getting a recurrent slot is a lot easier than an initial. But more often than not, especially when you get into, cabin class airplanes, owners are hopefully loyal to their crew and they want to keep the people they know and trust. And it's a very difficult conversation. We've seen a number of different things happening. One is begging and groveling. And my experience is that the hype about training is 80% true. What we have found, and we have a little strength in numbers. We're training 30 pilots a year in multiple slots. So we're probably buying 60 slots a year or so. But we've been able to pick up the phone, and we may not get next week, but we can get sometime in the next 60 days sort of thing. You plan the transaction differently. You stop trying to, when an owner says, well, I've got this trip in mid-June, so we need to close this week so we can get it through pre-buy and I can start operating the airplane in June. The answer is different. It's, hey, this is not a 30-day ramp-up period where, in previous times, you could close an airplane, get somebody, to school or trained or use some contractors, and you could actually ramp up an airplane in 30 or 45 days. The reality is it's now almost a 6-month process for a new model for an operator.
Yeah. And I'm up to my neck in this situation right now, trying to get training scheduled and things. It's not my hobby to keep up on flight safety's training policies, reservation policies, but here I am. So here's what's interesting. So flight safety takes reservations called TBAs. So a company says, yes, I'd like to take a G550 initial spot for this month. I don't know who it's for. I don't have a name of a pilot. And flight safety says, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, oh, don't worry about a deposit. You can cancel up to like 24 hours before with no penalty. This is great. So you can see how as soon as training becomes in high demand, everybody just snaps up TBA spots because just in case they need it, right? And then they cancel out. Like it's the worst system for everybody, flight safety included, because everyone could just cancel. And so they end up running classes when training is in high demand with empty spots. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I'm like, how is this even a thing? And so as I was getting all spooled up here, then they announced they're changing this policy. So effective June 1st, I've talked to her. I'm like, okay, I made the word relationship manager is her title. I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. I want to hear every month the total class size for each location for this new type rating. And I want to hear how many slots are TBA. And there's classes where there are 12 slots in this class, 12 are taken, 12 are TBA. I'm like, you got to be kidding me right now. I'm like, we have entitlement. We're ready to go. We have, training that it's guaranteed. It's issued from the manufacturer. Like it's called entitlement. And I'm like, we're ready. And I can't get in a class. Like there's no way. What they're doing now is effective June 1st. They will no longer accept or maintain pilot initial TBAs. So if you have a TBA, you don't put a name on it, then that's it. It's gone. And you have to put a pilot. And then now they're going to have, they're changing the cancellation policy. You're going to have some actual skin in the game, like a deposit, which for a $50,000 type rating would seem normal to me. And so they're changing that. But then the other thing, so all other pilot training, excluding pilot initials, commencing July 31st, flight safety will no longer accept or maintain TBAs for pilot courses within 60 days of course start. So now I think you're going to see recurrents and stuff start opening up 60 days prior, right? But the good news is initials, there's no more TBA nonsense, which is better for pilots. It's going to be better for owners too, because it's not, you're buying a 604. Okay, Brooks, find us a pilot, but he has to be typed on the 604. Like that narrows it down so far versus, being able to type whoever you want, the right fit.
Find us a good pilot. Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword. And you just talked about it with flight safety. CAE is doing the same thing, by the way, and I can share with absolute certainty because I actually had to pay a bill because we screwed that up and we had a pilot scheduled for a recurrent, and then we did the whole TBA game and got burned on it, and we ended up paying the bill for it. So flight safety is following in CAE's footsteps. But take a look at that if you're looking at it from the perspective of as a contract pilot. When you don't have much going on and a client says, if it's 2008, and you're a contract pilot, and then you have a potential client that says, hey, I think I might want to fly Wednesday through Friday. Would you just kind of pencil me in? Well, when you don't have anything else to do, you say, yeah, sure. Let's hope the trip goes, right?
Right.
I could really use the revenue. But when you're turning down other lucrative opportunities, your policy has to change. So I like that. I was always the guy, I still fly the line myself, and I was always the guy that would go to flight safety when it was convenient for me. And I had very little regard for what it did to their organization when I would throw something on the calendar and then decide on a whim, I don't really feel like going this week. I'm right down the road. I'm an hour and 45-minute drive to the training centers, so where we train. So frankly, it's painful for me personally, but I applaud them for making that decision because it creates fairness and equity in a training environment.
Yeah. And then the other thing I'll add too is that you can still make a TBA reservation for initial courses, but you have to pay for it. You have to pay for that slot. It says that you can purchase a TBA reservation for initials only. So anyway, I think that will change the training market. And Brooks, frankly, I'm a little shocked that you don't have more sympathy for flight safety because with their razor thin margins and their value added pricing, I'm surprised you don't feel bad, I mean, you can see how it's such a well-oiled machine when you get there and it's just run. Yeah.
That's getting everybody fired.
Joel, I don't think you can call flight safety anymore for sponsorship of the podcast.
No, don't worry. Flight safety will still be happy as long as you call with a credit card number. Don't you guys worry.
We get wave off signal. Max and I have done many rants on trading, but I think the other thing that's interesting too, we always say flexibility is the key to air power. And in the short term, I think if people commit to being available when there's a training slot open and just going on standby, I think probably in your experience too, Brooks, the training comes quicker than you would think. It's the people that are trying to schedule something for a known date. The real challenge is. And so it's one of those things. Have you had to do that, Brooks, where you say, look, we're going to buy this airplane. We're just going to put the crew on standby to go to training and we're just going to hope for the best? I mean, is that kind of the short-term solution right now?
Yeah. And, every scenario is a little different. Speaking about our specific organization on our management side, what has come of the lack of availability of training is now there's some peacefulness about that. In that, up until a year or two ago, we would schedule our pilots for training maybe a couple of months out, and that was it. And we'd kind of look at the schedule and we'd kind of think, well, this looks like a light week. We'll send that pilot to training. And then inevitably something would blow up and the schedule gets loaded up and now we're short on pilots because we didn't plan ahead. We didn't see that coming and we thought, well, we'll outsmart the system. And the reality for us is that by scheduling our training out, I mean, we're scheduled out now through the end of 2024 for recurrence and we have a couple of initials out there. But what has happened is there's calmness and peacefulness in our flight department now because everybody, they know, they can tell their spouse, I'm going to be gone for a week in training in September. So we can plan around that. And our flight crews know if I lose this slot because I need to take vacation on that time period, I may run out of currency or I may not get a do-over there. So now we have people that are planning around their training like it always should have been. And there's just, everybody's blood pressure is lower now than it was back in the day when we just try to throw some stuff on the calendar and, think 6 feet in front of us.
Let's take a break from talking about aircraft transactions, which, let's be honest, those are huge financial decisions. For most of us, probably huge financial decisions we're never going to have to make about buying a private jet. Listen, everyone's got to make big decisions at some point with their wallet. Why go it alone? When it comes to financial planning, let's talk Timothy P. Pope. He's got your back so you can focus on the mission ahead. Timothy P. Pope is a certified financial planner helping professional pilots design and execute smart financial strategies in retirement planning and investment management, military transition and tax planning. He's your financial planning partner. Timothy P. Pope helps professional pilots get the most out of flight.
Optimizing life for maximum fulfillment.
So, Brooks, we talked a little bit about some of the complexities of these deals. I think if you've been in business aviation long enough, you kind of know aircraft transactions. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Some of it, I wouldn't say it's not above board, but it's just sort of maybe not talked about. And like everything else, I think in the information age, things are becoming more exposed. But Can you kind of talk about traditionally what aircraft transactions have been like and maybe what the future is, kind of make it more transparent?
I'll kind of lead off by saying you as a human being are the content of the 5 closest people around you, right? And when you think about the world of aircraft transactions, it's important to draw a parallel in comparing the aircraft transactional world or the sales world to that of the real estate market. If you hire a real estate agent to broker a home for sale for you, for example, or help you buy a house, they are bound by fiduciary responsibility, by code of ethics. They're licensed. They're licensed professionals that have to take exams and have to comply with regulatory oversight. And the penalty of doing something that might be in their favor but not yours comes with the risk of loss of license or punitive damages. In the world of aircraft sales, there literally is no regulatory oversight. I do not hold a specific aircraft sales license because one doesn't exist. There are no governmental licenses. There's some accreditations that can be had, and so that creates substantial opportunity for bad actors to be involved when there's really no accountability other than that on the commercial side of commercial being the business side of customer chooses not to do business with you. Outside of large impropriety, that's the extent of it. And so I'm proud to say that I think the industry itself is doing a much better job of setting some standards for how transactions need to take place. There are really a lot of wonderful companies out there that do a really good job of assisting their clients and do so with the heart of a fiduciary capacity. But there are still people out there there are an alarming number of people out there that buy and sell airplanes, do back-to-back deals without disclosing their back-to-back deals, or where certain brokers help each other out, where there's incentivizing somebody for pick my airplane over the other one and those sorts of things.
You said a phrase called back-to-back, which many folks may not understand. So can you quickly summarize what a back-to-back transaction is and compare it to real estate and how crazy it would be if this happened in real estate?
And there's a legitimate back-to-back, and then there's an illegitimate back-to-back. And the legitimate back-to-back is, Dylan, I know you'd like to buy an airplane. We're finally going to get you your Citation XLS that you want. I have one that I can buy, and I'm going to put it in my inventory, and I'm going to flip it and sell it to you. Dylan, then at that moment, I'm going to buy it. And for even if that period of 30 seconds or, a month or however long I own the airplane and it's in my inventory, I have the financial risk and exposure for owning that airplane. And when you have financial risk and exposure, there is a right to a profit when that happens. That is how I would describe a legitimate back-to-back. Dylan, I'm going to buy this airplane. I'm going to turn it to you and sell it. And I'm going to use my expertise to buy an airplane for under the value in which I'm going to sell it to you. And I'm entitled to that profit because I used my 20 years of expertise to find that airplane and buy it. And I'm going to sell it to you for a fair price. That's a back-to-back deal. That is very similar to a dealer inventory. When you trade your car in to a dealership, that's their business model. And then there are the illegitimate back-to-back deals. And where you see a transaction where an airplane is just being flipped on paper from an unknown seller to the dealer or the broker back to the end user. A lot of times, and here's how it may not always even start out that direction, but a broker seasons a buyer for, hey, I really think we can buy this airplane for, $4 million, and all of a sudden realizes that he can buy the airplane from the seller. The seller actually will take $3.5 million. And that becomes either margin. I'm going to call that illegitimate margin. It's illegitimate up until the point at which it becomes disclosed in my book. Dylan, if I'm selling you an airplane and you know that I'm going to make margin on it, all is fair in love and war, right? But if I've represented to you that I can buy this airplane for $4 million and then I go buy it for 3.5, and I don't tell you that I bought it for 3.5, And maybe that transaction doesn't necessarily even look as a back-to-back, but there's a post-closing payment, or, use all of your imagination as to how that can possibly happen. And it's happened. I promise you it's happened. At the end of the day, I think the industry loses as a whole because of that. Because for anyone to have confidence in any business, if you hire a roofer, you need to presume that you have to be able to presume they're putting good quality materials on the roof of your house, right? And if you hire a dentist, you should presume that they're using the right filling material and, that sort of thing. And without that, you lose confidence in the industry. I think that happens a lot less than it used to, but it still does happen quite substantially. The number of times we've been approached over the years by other parties to a transaction about alternative compensation would be alarming to you. And we as an organization have never done that and never subscribed to that method of doing business. There's a better way to do it, and then everybody knows what measuring stick we're using then.
Yeah, that's really well said. There's a similar kind of sentiment, I think, in the online digital world right now, especially when you download like an app or something. And they say, if you're not paying for a service online or an app, you're the product, right? They're taking your data. The cost is there, right? So the cost can either be disclosed and you could be paying a month subscription fee for something, or if it's free, they're probably mining more valuable data. They're making money either way. And so what's better, something that's disclosed or not? And I think that's what is interesting about kind of your model, where, look, people have to make money in deals, right? But let's disclose it. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of transparency and how you and others are kind of trying to make the sales process a little bit more transparent for everybody?
And I'll lead off by saying it should not be noted that Vaerus Jet Sales is the revolutionizing force in the industry. There are so many wonderful brokerage firms out there, many of which are good friends of mine, that do a very admirable job of doing everything above board. They're the people we love to work with and that sort of thing. But it's a really simple equation. It's if you treat the transaction for the sale or purchase of a business airplane just like you would a real estate transaction, everybody that's party to a real estate transaction understands exactly what's at stake, and they understand who's being compensated, how much they're being compensated, and if there's a commission split or something of that nature. And so that's the process that we and other really good brokers, that's the path we go down. It's pretty simple. And frankly, my experience over the years is a good customer, a good purchaser or seller of an airplane expects that a good professional is going to make money. So simply just having a conversation about it. We charge a flat fee for the purchase or the sale of an airplane. It is based on a percentage up to a certain caps, but it's very simple. And then all of our brokerage agreements include language that says that we will never accept another penny from anybody that is a party or associated party or having anything to do with this transaction, without disclosing it to all the parties. Maybe sometime down the road, there's a reason that somebody comes to us and say, we'll pay a extra to help us buy this airplane. Well, that doesn't happen, but if it does, that would be an element of required disclosure per our relationship with our clients, disclosure and adjustment on the other end. In any event, kind of drawing a parallel to the training conversation of when you know what the stakes are and you know how to work within those brackets, there's a calmness that comes from that. There's a calmness that comes from, we're going to charge a fee to help you acquire an airplane. And all of a sudden, it takes the emotion out of it for us. It takes the emotion out of it for the person we're representing, because now we're just simply saying, you've paid us to buy you a widget. If you look at an airplane like a widget, let's buy you the best widget we can for the best price we can. And we're going to get paid whether we buy you a $5 million airplane or a $4 million airplane or a $20 million airplane. It doesn't matter to us. And it's just a simple, straightforward approach to doing business.
It seems so simple. It just seems like there's a lot. So you're saying in the industry, though, this is becoming more prevalent? You're seeing more and more of this, would you say?
Yeah. So what I see, and this is just a personal observation, that when you look at, the IATA accredited dealers and those sorts of things, much like the general world of franchises, the FBO business. There used to be a whole bunch of mom and pop FBOs out there, and they're all kind of getting bought up by, the big four or big three or whatever. And when you have strength in numbers like that, we could argue both sides whether that makes sense or not. But as you see a lot of the bigger firms that are doing really good work, you can't do business with that many people and do business in a dishonorable way and get to keep the right to continue to do business. So there are I'm speaking about the business aircraft world. I'm not talking about single engine Cessnas, that sort of thing. That's still the wild, wild west out there. But people that are transacting multi-million-dollar airplanes, there's almost a code of honor, a sense of pride that we see in the business, that all the good guys want the others to be good too. And that's fun to kind of see that we're all competitors with each other, but we, at the same time, we have to continue to do business together. And we wouldn't last if we weren't doing the right thing with all the parties that we're involved in. And the same thing with those guys. So the organization, thoroughbreds don't want to run with donkeys, right? If you're doing really good work in your trade, you don't want to associate with people that aren't. So naturally speaking, the industry, I believe, is going in the right direction.
Yeah, it's interesting to see because you guys are basically self-regulated on, or even lack thereof. It's kind of, like you said, like an honor code between people that would be a reputation and things. Where in the real estate business in 2006 and 2007, people were doing back-to-back transactions and all of that stuff that was not disclosed. And the federal government is very interested in protecting the masses, not so much in protecting the wealthy people that buy business jets. So they just legislated and made that where it was illegal and, through legislation. And there's the Association of Realtors, which is a body that self-governs and has all of the code of ethics and all of this stuff. And business aviation brokers have never had that. And there's never been an impetus by governing body to legislate fair and equitable processes because there's not much support for protecting millionaires or sympathy. I think it's really cool and admirable how you guys have kind of taken it upon yourselves, or a group of airplane brokers that have taken it upon themselves to try and do business with integrity and things to clean that up. And it seems to be working, like you were saying. So
yeah, that's why you see it's a vacuum of sorts, but in that most of the jet airplane transactions are conducted by the bigger brokerage firms. So yeah, that's the thing.
It's cool to see the evolution of the business as a whole, because like you said, at the beginning of this conversation, they didn't quite have the controls and it kind of made for wild swings in the market. And then like we're talking about here with airplane brokers and even with flight safety changing their policies and stuff, everything's tightening up maybe, and it's not the best for everybody individually, but as a whole, it's good for the business, whether you're an airplane broker or an airplane buyer or a seller or a pilot in the business. I think it makes the whole thing much better for everybody and much more stable. And
so it sounds like, there is a legitimate path for brokers to be able to kind of keep a transparent transaction. What about there's referral fees? Often they weren't disclosed. What if I'm a chief pilot listening right now and I'm going, wow, this sounds like a better model, and I have to provide counsel to the owner. There's brokers that are offering me a new car. How do I do this in an above board way if there's compensation that's out there for people associated with an aircraft owner that are trying to provide legitimate counsel? How do you guys approach that?
Well, so I would lead off by saying that business practice has been a part of the business. The manufacturers give referral fees. It is, if you're helping somebody buy a brand new airplane, they will give a referral fee. They're not large fees, but it's enough to thank someone for helping with the transaction, I guess. And so we do that, and we disclose it. We provide 2 unique opportunities for somebody that refers us the opportunity to do work. And there's very much of a difference between a referral fee and a less honorable fee paid for the influencing of a decision, meaning that when we pay a referral fee to someone that refers us a brokerage client on either end of a transaction, whether it's somebody that's needing to list an airplane for sale or somebody that's needing help buying an airplane, we do pay a flat fee for the referral of the business, not for the opportunity to influence the business, meaning that doesn't change our behavior throughout the transaction, whether we help somebody, it doesn't give somebody the right to steer the transaction in a certain direction, or doesn't pay for our influence and that sort of thing. And we do that in two different ways. One is either it's done via a referral agreement that is very much above board, and it has certain provisions that require honesty and integrity throughout that process. Either a cash payment or what I think is a lot more fun is an opportunity for a DC-3 type rating in our Vaerus Jet Sales DC-3.
What? Okay, we're going to have to talk a little bit more about that. Start with DC-3.
Okay, so Vaerus Jet Sales is the proud owner of, I believe, to be one of the top 3 nicest Douglas DC-3s in the world. We bought this airplane last year with the sole interest of using that airplane as our flagship to help promote our aircraft transaction business, to promote Vaerus Jet Sales. It's our Goodyear blimp. We use it. It's decked out and painted with Vaerus Jet Sales colors and logos all over it. We just put an interior in it that looks like a really big Gulfstream, and we use it to travel around the country to host entertainment options, cocktail parties, and entertaining flights, meaning that we'll take, if you have a group of people that are involved in business airplanes, we'll come to your airport and we'll do some cool cocktail parties on the airplane in flight. So if you got a group of friends, and this is obviously not for charge. We're not a commercial operator. We're not in the business of transportation for hire, but we use it to get our name out, to promote the brand. And I'm kind of sentimental about aviation, and then I'm a 3rd-generation pilot. I grew up around old airplanes. My dad used airplanes for business and then also flew a bunch of old warbirds. So I'm an old airplane guy at heart, and we use that DC-3. You know, there's a sentimental connection for me to my dad, but also I think we have to remember, back to, we all got our start because someone before us flew those trips in weather that we wouldn't think about flying in. People learned about flying in airplanes like the DC-3. So that it's an important part of honoring the way that we do business. That airplane represents a time when business was done by looking a man in the eyes and shaking his hand. And we kind of like to think that that's how we continue to do business. So it's representative of us from an emotional standpoint, but also it's a really cool airplane, and it's the biggest, most comfortable cabin I've ever been in for a business airplane. So,
and Dylan, I don't want to brag or anything, but I actually did fly with Brooks in the Vaerus Jet DC-3. Got to slide into the left seat and really hold that history in my hands. but I'll tell you what, I won't let this die. Just so everyone knows, on and off this program for Dylan. Because he's never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Brooks is one of our another favorite Dylanism right there. But it is cool. The airplane is awesome. And I'll tell you, flying in a DC-3 is not what you think. One, it's a lot quieter than you would anticipate.
Ours is.
In the cabin?
Not all of them, but ours is.
Is it yours? Okay.
Ours is super soundproofed, yeah.
That's the first thing I said when you took off. I was like, wow, that thing is actually, you could hold a conversation normally, just like this. It was crazy. And the other thing, when I flew it, is I've never flown such a big airplane with no yaw damper. So I'm no stranger to using a rudder, in a small airplane, tailwheel airplane stuff, but you just don't think about it in all the bigger airplanes I've ever flown, right? Like to compensate for adverse yaw and things. And this airplane, I roll into a turn and like yaws around. I was like, oh my God, you could hit the rudder when you put aileron in this thing. But it's a really cool experience, a really cool airplane. And
it's such a wonderful airplane to fly. And I was just actually training one of our pilots that had never really been in a tailwheel airplane in the airplane the other day. And it's amazing from start to the end of the first hour of flying it, the pilot's awareness of where the wind is coming from is exponentially higher than the previous 3,000 hours of flying they've done in tailwheel airplanes and jet airplanes. The guy I was training the airplane the other day was, he's a beach jet pilot and citation pilot and former airline guy, but man, he really knows where the wind's coming from now. And so I'm going to parlay that into the conversation about, hey, getting a DC-3 type rating in exchange for referring us an opportunity to do business with somebody is actually good for the owner of the airplane as well. because it is, if you look at it as if, hey, you buy an airplane and you're going to get an entitled training slot for that airplane. The reality is there's an airmanship that your level of airmanship increases. Situational awareness increases, understanding of the winds. Any training opportunity is good for any flight crew member. So I think it's a win-win all the way around. Come get a type rating, come get free training in the airplane, and you leave here a better pilot. Your client had the opportunity to work with somebody that is going to be full of integrity. That's probably maybe not the right word to say it, but approaching their business with a fiduciary heart at hand. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. We're not trying to hide it. We're not trying to not disclose it, but it's good for everybody.
And the other thing I might add is that on this show, we like to work with people that we actually believe in what they do and what service they provide is important. And I did have the opportunity to work with Brooks on an airplane transaction that it didn't end up coming together at the end of the day, but Brooks does do exactly what he says he's going to do. And I know a lot of people in sales have a reputation sometimes less than stellar, but I think they're at Vaerus Jet, they're really trying to dispel that and be above board. And he truly was. It came up, hey, before we start this, let's just define the relationship. Here's paperwork that defines that. So that way everybody knows. And it's very upfront and above board. And that's something that I really appreciated. And that's why we're happy to work with Brooks. So thank you.
Cool. As Max mentioned, we're going to be inducting Brooks into the Diamond Dog cadre, I guess. And we're looking forward to kind of having quarterly updates with you, Brooks, talking about the marketplace, talking about what you're seeing in transactions. You know, you also mentioned you guys have a full management company.
We do.
I think we're going to have some Diamond Dog questions for you on aircraft management as well. So I think you're going to be a great resource for the show. There's so much coming up that I think applies to folks. I mean, how many pilots do you manage?
We employ about 25 pilots.
Yeah. So you've seen a lot. So I think there'll be some great insight for us and for our listeners. So
yeah.
And Brooks, you mentioned that you fly the line. What do you fly right now?
So I do fly the line. I'm not sure I remember how anymore, but I do go to training and I fly 4 days a month now. And that kind of ebbs and flows. I fly our Nexton Beach Jet mostly because I grew up in that airplane and I've got everybody else wants to fly the big cabin airplanes and I love the Beach Jet. It's soft place in my heart. I fly our XLS and then I also fly our Challenger. I'm not typed in Challenger. I fly it as an SIC, but the Challenger goes to some places that I like to travel to. So I try to stay current in that airplane because it goes to Napa quite a bit. I like being in wine country. So
see, you're talking to two Beach Jet guys. I was
just going to say, all I have to say to you, Brooks, is positive rate, gear up, lights in, yacht amp on.
Yep.
Remember that? Don't those lights have like a speed limit? And
they do. And 200 knots is the speed limit on lights. But so, Max, I lied. My first 2,500 hours of jet time was in a Mitsubishi Diamond Jet.
Oh, yeah.
Predecessor to the Beach Jet. And the yacht amp stayed on the whole time in that airplane. So I had to learn to remember to turn the yacht amp on in the Beach Jet again after spending 2,500 hours in Diamond and then not flying one for 7 or 8, 9 years and then getting into the next jet. So the Diamond, when we would say we're climbing out in the ice and we'd get to about 26,000 feet, if we had wing heat and engine heat on, we'd have to level off because that's as high as we could climb with the wing heat on. And then we went to the next jet, which has 800 pounds, 700 pounds more thrust per side. And I'm in hog heaven right now.
Yeah, that looks like a really nice airplane. I never had the opportunity to fly the next gen with the Williams engines, isn't it? That is a lot more efficient and performs better.
Yeah, if we could just find a place to put the luggage, that'd be the perfect airplane.
You just got to work a little harder, Brooks. Come on.
I had this idea, and it's probably past this time. I was going to design like all of these different pieces of luggage that perfectly fit into the baggage of the airplane and then give them to the owners and be like, here, this is exactly what fits. So just pack these 7 bags.
That should have been on the next gen thing where you get the engines and the winglets and the avionics and this custom luggage set that stacks in there.
Custom luggage. Doesn't that seem like it would make sense? Because for folks that have not flown this airplane, it's not like a lot of others where it's just like this big square or like a kind of symmetrical space. There's like, there's a little channel in the middle and then there's a hump over here. And so it's like this little like Tetris puzzle to like put bags in there.
Can you imagine the marketing materials? You can bring whatever you want on the next gen beach jet as long as it fits in the supplied luggage.
You know, and I don't understand. Elliott did, they came out with their 300E model, and they had a nose baggage compartment in it. And I don't think that they actually did anything with that STC for the nose, but I would love to have that nose baggage in the airplane. That would make all the difference.
Yeah, it was a great airplane. Forget everything we said about Brooks coming on to consult us about sales. All future podcasts will just be beach jet related content. So I know all the listeners will be so excited.
That's right.
Well, we look forward to many more check-ins with you, Brooks. And I think everyone's going to benefit from your knowledge and experience in the industry. Next time we have you on, we're going to get a good DC-3 story out of you. And we look forward to hearing from you guys soon. Your contact information will be in the show notes. With how else, if you want to mention, like for folks to find you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I would start with just going to our website, vaerusjetsales.com. And then I would also go to vaerusjetsales.com /referral if you're interested in learning more about our referral program. But give me a call. My cell phone's on the website as well.
Thanks, Brooks. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Brooks.
Thank you, guys. Joel, come fly our PC-12 with us.
He's ready. He's smiling.
Easy.
Before we get out of here, Max, we got to do a little flight advice, which is, of course, brought to you by our friends at Harvey Watt, the largest provider of loss of medical insurance for pilots around the globe. Did you know 2/3 of Americans are taking medication for at least 2 chronic illnesses before age 65? Call the doctors at Harvey Watt to assist in reporting medications and health conditions to the FAA correctly to help avoid being grounded or flying illegally. It's just one of the services they provide with a policy. HarveyWatt.com to learn all of the offerings for professional pilots. Let's jump right into it. Joel, what do you got?
I work for a large 135 charter operator who recently paid for my ATP CTP course and written, all of which I passed as part of their Captain Upgrade program. It's been 3 months since the course and written, and the company never sent me a training contract as they did for other upgrade candidates. I'm still waiting to start the upgrade training, probably 3 months away. In the meantime, a new job opportunity has come up with a company I've had my eye on for a while. Since I never signed a training contract, I know I'm free to go wherever I choose. But I feel morally I need to stay for the upgrade. I know aviation is a small community and everyone talks, but I don't want this new job opportunity to pass me up. I don't want the new job to think I'm going to jump ship as soon as they give me a new type or training. Any advice on what to do would be great. Thanks, guys.
Here's the thing. He's right. Aviation is super small, and you burn a bridge, a lot of times that bridge will come back to burn you. But also, if this is such a great opportunity, then you also don't want to forego that just because of a training contract. So what I would say is you have to evaluate this as like a business decision, because the only way you can leave before a training agreement is up is to reimburse the pro rata share that is still due, right? So it's a $10,000 training event and it was a year commitment and you're leaving with 6 months left. That means you would owe $5,000. Like that would make everybody whole, right? And then you can say, look, I abided by my agreement. So depending on the strength of the opportunity, and that's not to say that everybody has, most type ratings are more than $10,000. So let's say $30,000 or $40,000. Not to say that you have $20,000, just you happen to have stuffed in your mattress last week to give away for something like that. But if the other opportunity is that strong, I think that it would be wise to, and it's worth, in this example, the $20,000 to buy your way out of the agreement you made to preserve your reputation and things in aviation. All of those things have a cost and have a value. And so you have to evaluate what the value is of your reputation and not burning that bridge, the value of this other opportunity and the value of that $20,000 and how it all fits in there. And if you think that the opportunity is worth the $20,000, then maybe you approach your current employer and say, hey, this is a great opportunity. I need to take it, but I feel like I made a commitment to you and I have to abide by that. And I'm willing to pay you back. Would it be okay if I paid you back over 6 months or a year or something, and try and work it out? Or maybe that relationship and that burning of that bridge isn't that important to you. Maybe it's not as important as $20,000 or as important as this new job opportunity. Maybe you make a calculated decision to burn that bridge. I suppose that's an option, right? So I think you have to look at it from that standpoint, at least, and apply a value to each one of those things and make the call. That's what we do, professional pilots.
That was incredible advice and actually probably very relevant for a lot of people that are in that situation. Unfortunately, that is not the situation this guy is in. He is not under a training contract. They told him they were going to send him one and they didn't. They should have, but they forgot to, it sounds like.
But it's the same advice, right? I mean, yeah, maybe he's not under a formal agreement, but it's implied. And formal or not formal, you're still burning the bridge.
Yep. And they've only invested in the ATP CTP course at this point and not a type rating. So I would just go and be honest. Here's the thing, though. He says a new job opportunity has come up with a company I've had my eye on for a while. He didn't say he has an offer or like a lockdown job. Lock that new job up first, then go talk to them, to your current employer. Be like, look, no one ever sent me a contract, but I want to leave on good terms with you guys if that's important to you. And then you can say, hey, look, it is a sign of good faith. I'd like to make you X amount of payments if you want to do something like that.
And in reality, most of the time, if you come to somebody and you're honest and you say, hey, look, I've got this new job, but I want to make things right, blah, blah, most of the time they're going to say, hey, dude, thanks for coming to talk to me. Good luck.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
That's
would just probably the most likely outcome.
Yeah.
Don't
talk to your present employer until you got everything locked down with the new employer. That'd be part two. And to your original point, Max, remember you helped me. I went through this. I was flying a 1978 King Air. I had just gone through training like a month or two before and signed like a $6,000 training contract. And then I got an offer to go fly a brand new Challenger 605. It didn't take too long to kind of pencil it out.
For a lot more money.
For more money, it wasn't a challenge. It's still, even then, it was like, it's no fun to write a check to get out of it.
You were tore up about it.
It wasn't a hard decision, but it was still like an uncomfortable decision. These guys had just invested money in me, and then like I had to leave, and you want to do the right thing. So it's not a comfortable conversation. Yeah.
My last corporate job, I flew a G3 7 years, and then we got a 450, and I went to initial and got that type rating, and I left after 6 months or something. And at first, the owner of the airplane, who I was pretty close with, and he was pissed. And I was like, dude, I said, listen, I showed up with a type rating on the G3. I flew it for this 7 years, just going to recurrent. I'm like, I'm sorry you made the decision to buy the new airplane and stuff, but I had no bearing on that, and I did not plan this. So you can't really amortize it out over the whole time I was with you. And he's like, oh yeah, good point. So then he got over it.
So our advice is go in and use the word amortize. That'll throw everyone off base. They'll be confused. They'll think you're talking about a mortgage, and then you'll be good. That is flight advice. We've got live flight advice coming May 24th with James O'Neill. If you have a quandary for flight advice, be sure to hit us up on the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, email, on the anonymous form. We'd love to get as many questions answered for you as possible because we are going to be doing it
Live. Okay.
There we go.
We'll do it live. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
That's right.
I'll write it and we're going to do it live, Dylan. That's it.
See that.
Tired of talking about it.
That's right. We're just going to do it. All right. Episode 99. That is going to do it. We're almost to 100. Joel asked us what we're going to do on our 100th episode.
One more and we're at the 3 digits.
Yeah. Kind of drew a blank of what we should do for our 100th episode. I want to play some clips from some of our favorite segments from over the years. Like, remember that one we did with the breakfast burrito fire in the air traffic control tower, and we were doing all those pretend radio calls?
Yeah.
Can we play that one again?
Did that make it onto the show?
Part of it, I think. We should look and see if we have some bloopers we could play from over the years. That would actually be pretty funny. Man, well, is going to do it for number 99. We're looking forward to 100 already, which will be in a couple of weeks. Thanks to everyone that wrote in to Flight Advice and to the Mailbag. You can always get a hold of us, info@215podcast.com. Thanks to our sponsors who put up with all of these shenanigans, Advanced Aircrew Academy, RB Watt, and our friend Tim P. Hope, financial advisor to the stars.
And keep an eye out for more details on the live flight advice with James O'Neill from Raven Careers.
That is going to be May 24th.
You think you need those questions. If you want to make an appearance, ask, be thrown to the fire live. let us know. info@215podcast.com.
Yeah. All right. Until the live event, just remember, flexibility.
It's the key to air power. See you next time.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.